in the year 1055. We died.
And ever since,
Our eyes.
we've been cursed.
We are condemned to witness every horror, every abomination of human and supernatural history.
Cannot close, and to narrate it without rest for all eternity.
We are the MogDark brothers, and this is the curse you won't be able to stop listening to. We were born in the year 1000, the year the world feared it would end, and instead, darkness awoke.
Huh. The apocalypse didn't come from the sky, Charles. It came from the flesh.
At 2 years old, we already saw what others couldn't. But they weren't dreams. They weren't visions. They were the truth. Raw, rotten, immortal.
Want to call it a gift? Call it whatever you want. We call it a curse.
We were cursed to witness everything, from our birth to long after our death.
Oh yes, we died in 1055. But the curse didn't die with us. Because this wasn't a curse upon the body. It was upon the eyes.
To see it all, to feel it all, to remember it all.
And believe me, Charles, the first thing we saw was not life. It was ash.
33 years after our birth, we witnessed what no soul should ever see.
The Massacre of Saint Brice's Day.
November 13th, year 1002.
The day England sealed its sin with fire.
They said it was for protection, for justice, but what we saw was something else.
We saw men slaughtered in their homes, women dragged through the streets, and children locked inside churches, and then turned into smoke.
The church burned as if hell claimed it from beneath.
And the most disturbing part was the silence. No one screamed, no one prayed. We only heard the bells, as if they were calling the dead to dinner.
Daniel, that day, I knew we would never rest. Rest? Huh. We weren't made to rest, Charles. We were made to remember. Saint Brice, the name that was never meant to be spoken. Before the fire, there was silence. A silence so thick, it hurt to breathe.
Do you remember that air, Charles? The air that smells like something that hasn't happened yet, but already hurts.
Yes, a heavy air that slipped under the doors and laid down in the middle of the beds.
They all spoke of peace, of alliance, but the eyes said something else. The eyes always say it all.
The Danes lived among them, in markets, in houses, in churches.
And the king saw them as knives wrapped in smiles.
Æthelred dreamed of conspiracies. He saw traitors in every shadow, and the shadow devoured him.
It wasn't an attack. It wasn't an invasion. It was something far more filthy. It was fear, Charles. Fear disguised as reason.
Fear sat on the throne and ordered the killing without lifting a sword.
When a king begins to fear his own guests, there is no feast that doesn't end in blood.
And you know the most disturbing part, Daniel? No one raised their voice. No one asked.
Because when the enemy sleeps in your home, every word becomes treason. Every gesture, a threat.
Every home became a field of suspicion, and every shared bed, a possible trap.
That's how empires die, from the inside, in a whisper, and with their eyes wide open.
The massacre was not born of fire. It was born of an idea. The fear that sleeps at home. Wars usually begin with swords, but sometimes it all starts with something more delicate. Something cleaner to the eyes and much filthier to the soul. A scroll, a seal, and a decision made in a cold chamber surrounded by cowards disguised as counselors. Æthelred, the king, they called him the Unready. A man who didn't even trust his own shadow, let alone those who spoke a different tongue. The problem is, those others weren't across the sea. They were inside, in his towns, in his churches, in his bed. And so, without a battle, without defense, without any trial, he ordered that all Danes in his kingdom be eliminated. Not fought, not exiled, not watched. Eliminated.
And there you have it. A government act not dictated by hate, Charles. That would be too easy to understand. Remember, this was signed out of fear from that rotten part of the soul that no longer knows how to distinguish between danger and paranoia. Æthelred didn't see enemies. He saw faces. He saw foreign names. He heard different accents and turned them into threats. And with trembling hands, he sealed a decree that stated exactly this: that all Danes within the kingdom, without distinction, be exterminated. Nothing simpler, nothing clearer, nothing more damned. And while the ink was still drying, many were already dead. Others had only minutes left.
And there was no turning back, because when a decision is sealed by a crown, it becomes law. And when law is born of fear, it only begets ruin. I remember that scroll, not for what it said, but for what it summoned, because there was something in it, an echo, a sort of crack in time, as if each word had been written not only in ink but in fire, but in ash. The decree was read in public squares, in council halls, in temples, and no one dared to oppose it.
And who could, when the sword is not in the soldier's hand, but in the scribe's, when the executioner is the royal seal? Charles, you know it as well as I do. That moment was the beginning of the blaze, not the fire itself, not the flames, but the whisper, the spark. The decree was the incantation. The massacre was merely the consequence.
And so it was marked forever, not as a defense strategy, not as an act of leadership, but as what it truly was, a prophecy written by a coward and fulfilled by murderers in uniform. When a king orders blood, everything else is written in fire. And then it came, the day, November 13th, the year 1002, the day of Saint Brice. The bells tolled, not to announce a mass, not to honor the saint, but to silence the heavens. From the north to the south of the kingdom, the order spread like a poison with no cure. Blades were unsheathed, not in the name of justice, but in the name of silence. In small villages, the Danes were cornered like animals. In towns, they were stabbed in marketplaces, in fields, buried alive, and in cities. In Oxford, what happened wasn't just a crime. It was an offering to hell.
I remember Oxford, Charles. I can still smell that damp wood, that moisture soaked with fear. The Danes knew what was coming. They had nowhere to run, no army to protect them. They had children, they had wives, and they had faith. They took refuge in a church, a temple built of stone, dedicated to hope, to redemption, to God. And then they sealed it. Outside, the English barricaded the doors. Inside, the screams rose like torn psalms. And when the torches were hurled at the walls, everything turned to smoke. The church now burned like a sacrificial altar, as if God himself had closed his eyes.
I saw a mother clutch her baby as the flames began to devour the stained glass. I saw a man try to break the bars with his bare hands until his fingers fell off. And the worst part, Daniel, the worst part was the silence that followed. Because when the church collapsed and the flames died down, there was no trial, no guilt, only ashes.
Ashes mixed with incense, with prayers, with crosses, with faith itself. They burned the men, but also the symbol. Because that day, Charles, the fire didn't just destroy bodies, it destroyed the sacred. The house of God became a furnace, and the angels did not descend.
The day of Saint Brice wasn't just a massacre, it was sacrilege. An act so repugnant, the time itself tried to bury it. But we saw it. We remember. Fire in the house of God. And no one put it out. After the fire came the silence. But not a silence of peace. Not a rest. It was a silence. Unnatural. A void that clung to the skin that made you hold your breath, even if you didn't know why. No one celebrated. No one smiled. Not even the executioners. The squares fell mute. The markets stood empty. And the churches remained open, as if something had left them.
And then the visions began. Monks waking in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, speaking in tongues that no longer exist. Seers scribbling impossible phrases with pupils blown wide as if they were seeing not this world. And the rivers, Charles, the rivers turned red for 7 days, and no one could explain it.
I saw a child wake up screaming in Latin, a blind old man describing the burning of Oxford as if he'd seen it from within. And that's when I knew what had been set ablaze wasn't just wood and flesh. Something else had been lit, something ancient, something buried.
It moved along the walls, through the wheat stalks, across shattered, stained glass, through the trembling hands of those who didn't know what they had unleashed. Because that massacre wasn't just an act of violence, it was a ritual without a name, and what it woke has not gone back to sleep.
Sometimes punishment doesn't come with thunder, it comes in silence, in the things no one dares to tell, in the sleepless nights, in the eyes that refuse to close. Something woke up, and it is not alone. Every action echoes, and in this case, the echo came from the sea. A full year hadn't passed when the crows began to circle the coasts. They weren't rumors, they weren't warnings. They were sails, cutting through the fog like blades. Svein, king of the north, father of Canute, didn't come for land, he didn't come for glory. He came to collect.
He gave no speeches. He asked no questions. He sought no diplomacy. Because what happened in Oxford is unforgivable. What burns in a temple is paid for in entire cities. And that's what he did. He burned, he crushed, he slit throats. He came from the east and left nothing alive that could remember the west.
You are England, the proud island, broke like a rotten wooden board. Monasteries ransacked, kings humiliated, children taken as hostages or as bargaining chips. And among all that fire, no one spoke of the decree. No one mentioned Saint Brice. But everyone felt it.
Because it wasn't just an invasion. It wasn't men's revenge. It was cursed justice. It was as if the spirits of the burned guided every step, as if every scream from Svein carried the voices of the children locked inside that church.
I saw temples collapse without being touched. I saw storms fall only over specific cities. And I heard, in the night, voices speaking in Old Norse, when no one alive spoke that language on those lands.
It wasn't a war. It was punishment. And what came after was only ash. Because when you burn the innocent, you don't just ignite fire. You awaken the dead.
Æthelred did not die as a king. He died like an uneasy whisper in the corners of history. He didn't fall in battle. He wasn't assassinated. No one betrayed him. He simply fled, abandoned his kingdom, his throne, and hid behind walls that not even guilt could breach. Though memory certainly did.
A king who fears ghosts more than enemies. Do you remember, Charles? That day, when he abandoned London in the night, without ceremony, without witnesses, without honor. And yet, everyone saw him leave. Everyone, even those who were already dead.
Sikiros. The kingdom forgot him, but the sin did not. Because Æthelred's name was not marked in ink, but in fire. A coward with a crown, a silence with a scepter, a shadow dressed in purple.
And Saint Brice's day was no longer remembered as a holy day, but as a forbidden one. A date the books refuse to write, a date that still stains the walls of time.
Because there are mistakes that don't get buried with the one who made them. There are acts that awaken things that never go back to sleep. Saint Brice, the name that was never meant to be spoken. There are dates that should burn into oblivion, not because they don't matter, but because they hurt too much to be remembered.
But the problem, Charles, is that dates don't vanish. They just hide beneath marble, beneath speeches, beneath hypocritical masses and censored books.
Human horror doesn't end when blood is spilled. Sometimes that's where it begins. Because there are acts that awaken things we do not understand, that do not stop, that do not die with their authors.
Did what you saw disturb you? Good. That's the point. Because if something in this still burns inside you, then you're still human.
If you think this is over, then you haven't understood a thing.
This wasn't a memory. It was a crack. And now, you're already inside.
In this place, stories don't die. They crawl.
And some retell themselves on their own.
The next one will come when you least expect it. And believe me, next time, you'll wish you hadn't heard it.